This video will contain major plot points for Consume Me and will include discussion of disordered eating and anti-fat bias. Viewer discretion is advised. This is Consume Me, a semi-autobiographical game created by Jenny Jiao Xia and A.P. Thompson, following the character Jenny through the most emotionally tumultuous years of her teenage life. The central theme of the narrative focuses on Jenny's negative self-image and the unhealthy obsession with her diet she develops to cope with it. It combines cute, colorful visuals with dark humor to convey the stresses the character feels in her life. It was released in the fall of 2025, and while I'd been eagerly awaiting its release since I first learned of it, I am ruled by my interest-based nervous system, which meant it took a few months to decide it was finally my time to enjoy it. I streamed the majority of my first experience and had a great time. This is so dark. Chewing gum. Stave off hunger by pretending to eat. The tricky thing about this game, I am aware that the actions the character is taking in this game are not healthy or good, but then I want to play the video game the best I can. I finished the final chapters on my own time because my streaming schedule is at the whim of Genshin Impact update cycles. I finished my first go-around and immediately started again. There were Steam achievements after all. But more importantly, I just can't get enough of Food Tetris. Even though my familiarity with its overall structure prepared me for the various turns of the narrative, I was pleasantly surprised to find there's plenty of variation to keep things feeling fresh. There were random events I hadn't seen before, different extracurricular checklists, and the natural inclination to create self-imposed challenges to achieve the game's goal. There's even some sneaky dynamic difficulty adjustments under the hood, raising the goal targets if I started playing the game too well. While I was playing and replaying the game for my own enjoyment, I must confess I had already started composing this video in my head, and as much as I wish I could claim it was only because I like the game so much, I just had to make a video about it, I also had another reason, explaining why people who don't like the game are wrong. I'm kidding, of course, but only on a technicality. If someone told me they played the game but it just wasn't for them, that's one thing. I understand that. Lots of things are probably great, but just not for me. But too many of the game's smattering of not recommended Steam reviews based their position on the game having a religious agenda. I'd seen a few comments to that effect before I'd had time to play the game myself, but I'd almost forgotten about them until Chapter 2. But there, the presence of religion was more of a detail in the background art than an overt plot point. Oh, okay. This is all getting much more clear now. It wasn't until the last act of the story that religion actually became a feature in the plot. However, by the time I'd rolled credits, I was even more confused by the negative reviews. Had we played the same game? Did they stop before the story had fully concluded? While I doubt any of those reviewers are likely to ever see this video, and the overall reviews are very positive, I still felt compelled to push back on such unfair criticism. I'll talk about that in more detail later, but first, let's get the lay of the land. The core gameplay loop revolves around setting goals and then organizing main character Jenny's days around completing her to-do list to achieve them. The very first goal in the tutorial chapter is to learn how to diet, after Jenny's mom criticizes the size of her lunch and the roundness of her face. Also, has she seen Jilia's daughter lately? Why can't Jenny be more like her and have some self-control? Under the stern guidance of her inner voice, Mirror Jenny, Jenny learns how to monitor her food intake by counting bites, a fictional analog to calories, and exercising to keep her daily totals under a probably arbitrary limit. Each day, Jenny has to assemble her lunch out of a random assortment of Tetris-shaped food bricks, hoping to cover as many of the hunger spots on the plate before no more possible moves can be made. Sometimes the family dog will pop up asking for a treat. You can take advantage of this to get rid of high bite or unusable food shapes. The game assures us that all the foods are safe for fictional dogs. If every hunger spot is covered and the bite total is under par, you're rewarded with a shower of sparkles. Don't expect that to happen often, though. Jenny must also manage her mood, energy, and guts levels while keeping up with responsibilities like studying and doing chores in her limited free time. Free time activities also increase her skill levels in areas like academics and chores. The activities take the form of WarioWare-style minigames, which use an intentionally awkward control scheme. Her arms and legs stretch and flop around, makeup tools wiggle constantly as you try to use them. The gameplay conveys how awkward Jenny feels doing these seemingly simple tasks. Each chapter's main goal gives Jenny 1 week in which to complete her to-do list and keep her various gauges and meters not too full and not too empty. Going to bed with 0 mood, energy, or guts? That's a game over, unless you can fix it with a late-night snack. But using up too many cheat days before the final deadline is also game over. The stakes go up with each subsequent chapter, ratcheting up the volume of things Jenny must achieve before the end of each successive week. In addition to the primary goals, she must also complete a minimum number of extracurricular tasks. Failing to finish all the requirements by the end of the week is, you guessed it, a game over, after which Jenny wakes up as if from a nightmare to ask, "What day is it?" This gives you a chance to determine just how badly you messed up and how far back you must go to fix it. Can you do better by just starting the day over? Do you have to repeat an entire week? This becomes the primary way that the game uses its mechanics to underpin its narrative themes. The bright, cute visuals serve to mask the anxieties running deep through both its narrative and its gameplay. Failure is never an option. No setback is too minor. Any one thing going wrong is enough to completely eradicate all of Jenny's other achievements. Having been a teenage girl myself, I know quite well how intensely a teenage girl specifically can perceive the stakes of her life. Mirror Jenny insists the strict diet must be adhered to with utmost rigidity, even in later chapters when other concerns appear to be far more pressing. Jenny starts dieting out of a fear of becoming fat, but in truth, becoming fat is really standing in for the much greater fear that she is fundamentally unlovable. If she doesn't control her diet, it will reveal the lack of discipline in the core of her being, which would therefore prove to everyone how undeserving of love she really is. That principle, that fat equals undisciplined equals unlovable, is precisely the mindset that the game's own content warning calls out as unhealthy and not to be imitated. Unfortunately for all of us, it's a foundational principle that permeates the actual world we occupy and is particularly tricky to push back against. As an elder millennial, I have several decades' experience with specifically American diet culture. The popular methods to pursue the ideal level of thinness, and therefore allegedly health, may always be changing, but a few core beliefs always remain the same. Whatever size your body is, especially a female body, it probably could and therefore should be smaller. Losing weight is easy, and anyone who can't do it is just lazy. And laziness, of course, is a huge moral failing. Since that's more or less the prevailing cultural thinking, people in fat bodies, or even just any body viewed outside a narrow standard of attractiveness, are often the subject of scorn, ridicule, almost fully dehumanized. While the game is careful to never mention specific numbers like weight or clothing size, it seems that Jenny's diet is initially giving her results she's pleased with, at least where such things are concerned. That is quite different from my own experience. Since adolescence, I've been self-conscious about my body, especially since the cultural obsession with a flat stomach seemed to reach a peak in my youth. My belly stuck out, and I was often just outside the size range of trendy juniors' clothing stores. I was never an athletic kid, and my gym class experiences really didn't help much with that. Moving my body simply never felt fun, so exercise just felt like punishment for not being skinny. And I'm well aware that my experience is probably nothing like what anyone larger than me ever has to put up with. As an adult, I still find it difficult to decouple exercise as a concept from the goal of changing my body's size or shape. Body positivity would be great, but at this point, I'd settle for body neutrality. Playing through Consume Me felt very accurate to my own experiences with calorie counting. Something as simple as going on a pizza date causes a lot of anxiety and mental calculations. Can you get by eating less earlier in the day? Do you have time to squeeze in a workout so you don't go over? How long can you hold out on your ever-shrinking meals before you get too hungry and ruin it all in a fugue state of snacking? My own experience and observations led to the conclusion that it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, for anyone to develop a relationship with food that is not at least a little bit disordered at some point in their life. We live in a culture where foods are often labeled as either sinful or guilt-free. Ordering a salad for lunch means you're being good today. Older relatives might teasingly suggest that a slice of cake canceled out any exercise you recently did. I grew up in a period of increased awareness of eating disorders via daytime talk shows and soapy TV movies. I learned that skipping meals, purging, and excessive exercise were unhealthy and bad, but at the same time was surrounded by messages that unrestrained eating or simply existing in a larger body was also bad. Confusing.
Ma'am, do you have this in the next size up?
Sorry, we only carry sizes 1, 3, and 5. You could try Sears.
There used to be a real store called 579, and it was called that because they only carried clothes in sizes 5, 7, or 9. Have you noticed I keep using words like virtue, morality, or sinful when talking about diet culture? Well, you can thank these guys for that. I'm serious. The lingering influence of the Protestant Christian colonists is so foundational to American society, you're probably familiar with the concept of Protestant work ethic, even if you've never set foot in a church. Now, I'm no theologian, so forgive me if I slightly misrepresent the doctrines of Reformed Christianity, aka Calvinism here. While the flavors of Christianity I grew up familiar with teach that anyone can be saved, conditions apply.
Well, I'll be a son of a bitch. Delmar's been saved.
Well, that's it, boys. I've been redeemed. The preacher done washed away all my sins and transgressions.
16th century theologian John Calvin thought that salvation was reserved only for a specific number of people God had predestined, and everyone else was bound for eternal damnation. Bummer. Since it's impossible to be certain you're one of the chosen, all you can do is work hard and eschew all unnecessary comforts, so you can at least have the outward appearance of being saved. If you forego worldly pleasures and work as hard as possible, and you have good health, a prosperous farm, and several children who survive infancy, you might just be one of the blessed few who have God's favor. Several hundred years later, we ended up with ideas like, success is the result of hard work. People on welfare are lazy, and billionaires worked hard for that money, and asking them to pay taxes is really mean, actually. How this relates to diet culture is the widespread common thinking that your health is also a reflection of your work ethic. If you're healthy, and as I already mentioned, that usually assumes you are thin, it's because you put in the effort to earn or maintain it. If you're fat, it's your fault for giving into sinful pleasures too much. Robert Eggers' film The Witch offers a bleak example of Calvinist doctrine in practice. Imagine you are Thomasin, a teenage girl in 17th century New England. Your father has gotten the entire family excommunicated from the colony, so you all moved out to build a new home on an isolated patch of land. A bunch of bad stuff happens. Starvation is imminent, and the family goat might be the literal devil. And there's an actual, honest-to-goodness witch in the woods. Under such circumstances, it makes perfect sense to me that Thomasin would accept a talking goat's offer of the taste of butter in exchange for her soul, which, by all available evidence, does not have God's favor anyway. Go live deliciously, girl. Of course, religious asceticism goes back even further than the Puritans. Throughout much of human history, intentionally denying the body's physical needs has been done as an act of devotion or a means of transcending mortality towards the divine. For whatever reason, humans seem to have a tendency to believe there's some inherent virtue in suffering. Maybe it seems like a huge stretch to connect the religious beliefs of 17th century peasant farmers to modern thinking about health and diet, but that specific historical influence is undeniably present in our modern world. Even if the specific religious underpinnings have become largely invisible, they still find their way into our cultural landscape. In such a mindset, those with seemingly healthy bodies are believed to be the product of their own admirable efforts, while the unhealthy, especially fat people as well as disabled people, are a drain on society and deserve no grace because they did it to themselves. That kind of thinking simply reeks of Calvinism. It is also, to my great displeasure, the prevailing philosophy of the current health administration. So you might be asking, hey wait, I thought you said that Consume Me didn't have a religious agenda. Why are you talking so much about Calvinism? First of all, good job paying attention. Go get yourself a sticker from the Good Listener prize bucket. Secondly, I'm just trying to give background information on how and why the way we as a society think about food and exercise tends towards a moralistic view. Neither the game nor the player exists in a vacuum. It's all one big messy tangle of cause and effect. Each chapter opens with a recurring nightmare. A tiny and vulnerable Jenny holds up a giant platter of the visual representations of her mental burdens as they relate to the current goal. In Chapter 1, there aren't too many. Her disapproving mother, a laundry basket, a small diet book. You can try to arrange and stack them neatly, or you can drop them haphazardly, watching them bounce and tumble off. Each time the nightmare repeats, the number and variety of objects grows, continually piling up and tumbling off the platform until the floor beneath her begins to crack under the pressure of it all, and Jenny snaps awake. Jenny feels like she is not enough, and is incredibly sensitive to any hint it might be true. Being frequently compared against the neighbor's supposedly perfect daughter breaks through Jenny's carefree teenage facade to reveal insecurities that must have been just under the surface for some time. The slightest possibility that her boyfriend Oliver might find it too embarrassing to introduce her to his mom, or worse still, might simply lose interest in her, is a problem that demands to be solved immediately by becoming even more interesting and therefore lovable. By Jenny's estimation, the baseline of goodness required to be of any value to others requires maximum effort on her part at all times. Mirror Jenny speaks as if the solution to Jenny's problems were the most obvious thing in the world. Just eat less and exercise more. Just study enough to get a perfect SAT score on the first try. I think if I just improve my academics, I should be able to get a good score. Just improve my academics, my lowest leveled skill. No problem, it'll be easy. Just be disciplined. She can be perfect if she just puts in the effort. If she fails even a little at achieving that perfection, her life is as good as over. In reality, going as little as 5 bites over the line more than twice in a week wouldn't stop her from completing the rest of her goals. But here, it's a success-annihilating nightmare that Jenny must shake off before trying again. The thing about this perfection is that it is never satisfied. There's no room to rest, or take a breath, or appreciate her accomplishments. Once one goal is achieved, it just unlocks an even more demanding one. But that's not what Jenny's mirror self tells her. You just have to get through this 1 week, she says. Just do everything perfectly for this 1 week, and then you'll be okay. Over and over again. Never once acknowledging that okay remains forever just out of reach. Her laser-focused pursuit of perfection impacts her relationships as well. Her confrontation with Joanna offers a small peek at how Jenny is perceived by others. We all know how rich and skinny and popular you are. You don't have to rub our noses in it. Since the player is largely only seeing her life through Jenny's to-do lists, that declaration might feel like it came out of nowhere. Popular? Besides Oliver, we've only seen Jenny occasionally talking to Pauline. Joanna's grievances feel justified in hindsight. Her picture was there on the mirror from the beginning, but she wasn't even mentioned at all until Chapter 3. Maybe Jenny's current focus on dieting and productivity is a significant change from how she was before. Regardless, it seems clear to me that Joanna feels like her friend is suddenly ignoring her and reacting accordingly. She may be a hater, but not entirely without reason. Chapter 4 ends on Jenny submitting her early decision college application, then smash cuts into the start of Chapter 5. college finals week over a year later. Jenny is as confused as the player might be. Did she get into Cornell? No. All the work she, and you as the player puppeteering her, did in the previous chapter to get into Cornell, where Oliver is, still wasn't enough to secure her place there. But Mirror Jenny refuses to throw in the towel. There's still a chance of transferring into Cornell by simply earning flawless grades in the very classes Jenny is inconveniently already on the verge of failing. Also, the diet is still at the top of the agenda. Oliver has been distant, and Jenny can't give him any reason to become even more distant. Despite their often adversarial interactions, it's important to keep in mind that Mirror Jenny is Jenny. The increasingly unreasonable demands are coming from inside the house. College life presents the game at its most challenging. No one is paying her to do chores anymore. Worse, she has to pay to do her laundry now. No dogs allowed in college dorms, so there's no way to get rid of undesirable foods. She has 2 exams in a matter of days, and the pressure is pushing her to her breaking point. It's also where Jenny's come to Jesus moment occurs. Hoping to get help for her bio class, Jenny comes face to face with her till then unseen nemesis, Florence She Leah's daughter. The her in Jenny's mom's refrains of, "Why can't you be more like her?" Florence is a model student, diligent and beautiful, but also so genuinely charming and kind that Jenny finds herself instantly opening up to her. Florence comforts her, saying, "Let me guess. You feel like if you let anything slip, everyone you love will abandon you." By the end of the meeting, Jenny's been invited to church with Florence, to presumably learn firsthand just how she manages to be so freaking perfect. Now, as I mentioned before, I felt motivated to make this video in part to push back on the negative reviews complaining that Chapter 5 presents Jesus as the solution to all of Jenny's problems. That strikes me as both unfair and inaccurate. Claiming the game wants to present Christianity as a cure-all makes as much sense as saying it's presenting restrictive dieting as healthy, effective, and enjoyable. I suppose I might as well disclose that I grew up attending church with my family throughout my high school years, but by college I had more or less drifted away from that identity. Maybe to some this will betray my position as biased and therefore meaningless, but I think it gives me enough context to recognize when something is religious propaganda versus a personal story that happens to have religion in it. It also enabled me to grasp a possible reason for Oliver's panic in Chapter 2. Of course not. I'm just ashamed of my carnal desires. It's just, I'm supposed to be the good son. In a family with that many religious icons on the walls, being discovered alone in the house with any girl could absolutely threaten his good son reputation. To me, Konsumi's church scene is hilariously relatable, and very clearly a joke. For anyone without similar life experience, let me point out a few of the tells. While a big city church might hold services in a space sublet from a bar or nightclub, they don't generally serve alcohol during services. Christian worship music, at least in my experience, is unlikely to compare Jesus Christ to either a homing missile or an eagle clutching a helpless mouse in its claws, or ever include the refrain, "Swallow me whole." I can empathize with reviewers who felt the scene was uncomfortably long, but skipping it entirely would mean ignoring what the game is actually trying to say with it. Yes, it's cringe. Contemporary Christian worship music is that cringy. That's what makes this one so funny. After the church scene, Jenny unlocks a new prayer activity. This seems to be the other thing specifically called out by negative reviews. But again, reducing Chapter 5 and the game as a whole to a pat Jesus solved all her problems only makes sense if you ignore everything else happening from that point on. Not one of Jenny's problems were, or even could have been, solved by going to church one time and suddenly becoming a Christian. The prayer action can clear any negative status effects, especially the mental blocks that appear whenever she tries to study for her exams. The mental blocks can be cleared by doing something specific like eat chips or restore energy to 100%, and Jenny can't continue to study until they're dealt with. Prayer takes 0 time, clears the status, and restores a little bit of mood and energy, which undoubtedly makes it powerful, but crucially, it only works once per day. Every time Jenny does the study action again, her target score ticks up just a tiny bit, and she earns a fresh mental block. She's going to need to study multiple times a day before her first exam to avoid an early game over. The prayer action is simply an additional tool in the already existing toolkit, no more powerful than energy drinks or staying up late. late at squeezing more productivity than should be possible out of Jenny's free time. In fact, if you really wanted to, it's possible to pass that first exam without using the prayer action at all, though it won't be easy. When the rest of her week is sidelined by the devastating breakup with Oliver, Jenny abandons her to-do list and replaces it with a message about salvation. You are now free of sin. But again, pay attention to what else is happening in the scene. She isn't crying in the shower while deleting her to-do list because her newfound faith has actually solved any of her problems. She's simply doing the same thing she's done for the entire game, desperately try to exert any control she can as her life spins ever more out of her control. The semblance of Christian salvation is just a filter to reframe this sudden, destabilizing loss of purpose as a choice she is actively making. It's fine, she tries to tell herself. None of this matters now. Note how during the following day's free time, she refuses to do any activities at all because she doesn't feel like it right now, including prayer. That's not salvation, that's depression. Maybe this is a hot take, but I don't really have any beef with the game's portrayal of Jesus, aside from how very white he appears. The concept of a loving and justice-oriented Jesus Christ, blessed are the peacemakers, love thy neighbor and all that, is not why I stopped considering myself a Christian. When Jenny prays, via text message to my great amusement, it offers her a chance to take the worries that plague her out of her head and in turn receive a gentle reminder that she is loved. All she wants is to be loved. So I can't be too mad if she found any relief during a hard time in her life from a cringy song telling her she's worthy of God's love. If an encounter with the concept of a loving God was a necessary first step to loving herself, I say, good for her. I absolutely understand why someone might feel put off by unexpected Christian subject matter, or even be concerned they've been tricked into a sermon with an altar call. Nobody likes to be cornered by a sales pitch after all.
I am filled with Christ's love.
However, someone telling you a story about their life isn't trying to convert you just because their life story includes Jesus. They're just asking you to hear them out while they try to share something about themselves. I'm speaking now to the theoretical player who stopped engaging with the game the moment Jesus showed up and wrote the whole game off based on what they assumed was going on. Please, try actually hearing what the game as a creative work is communicating. Art is a conversation, and you can't have a conversation if you stop listening. And in case you're still not convinced about what the game is actually saying about Jenny's faith, consider this. In the final recurrence of her nightmare, when the weight of all her mental burdens causes the floor to crack and finally crumble apart beneath her, she falls helplessly past the saintly image of white Jesus, who neither helped her lift those burdens or tried at all to catch her before she hit rock bottom. It's a mistake to assume someone telling you a story about their life is offering a life lesson with the solution to all their problems by the end. I genuinely believe Konsumi's developers created it intending only to express how it felt to be an anxious teenager, communicated via clever use of gameplay systems, and inspired by their real-life experiences. By telling this story in an interactive format, the audience is invited to fully step into the character's point of view, seeing every meal as a puzzle to be solved, daily schedules optimized to the extreme, feeling the frustration when your efforts are undone and rendered meaningless by random chance. While there are numerous unique game over scenes that could be counted as bad endings, there's only one real ending here, and it always plays out the same way once you get to Chapter 6. That too is something that I think is intentional. The player might feel frustrated to realize that there's nothing they can do differently to change the outcome, but they'd be making the same mistake Jenny is in thinking she can optimize her way into her perfect life. Before showing Jenny the good end she missed out on, Mirror Jenny calculates her final grade, but in the end, it doesn't actually matter that any of the results are objectively good grades. In fact, Mirror Jenny calls you out for having played before if you get the best grade. The whole point is that nothing could ever be good enough, because Jenny doesn't believe she is good enough yet. Her entire journey was forcing herself to fit someone else's idea of what good enough looked like. Even her enthusiastic embrace of Jesus is just trying to copy Florence's method to being good enough, The best ending is a wild, impossibly cartoonish fantasy, and the relentless pursuit of it has been distracting Jenny from actually learning who she is and what she actually wants for her life. Chapter 6 unfolds into an epilogue that also becomes the story of the game's own development over the 10-plus real-life years of real-life Jenny. It uses a combination of familiar minigame vignettes and actual photos to document the path from going back to school, discovering an interest in game dev, meeting friends and collaborators, and taking those first steps into the game industry. Hey, doesn't this guy she's pitching her game to kinda look familiar? Wait. She's comparing her game to Florence, the game. Is Shilia's daughter, being named Florence, a metatextual joke about how Consume Me was always going to be compared to other narrative indies like Florence? It took me this long to realize this? As Chapter 6 goes on, you start to see Jenny maturing, not into the fantasy version of her perfect adult self, but into someone who can finally give herself the space to get curious about what she's really passionate about, who she actually wants to be, what she wants for herself, instead of trying to match someone else's template. Someone who is living the life she actually has, messy and imperfect as it is, in a way that still makes her happy. If the game wants to offer any kind of life lesson at all, I think that's just it. You don't have to be perfect. You only have to be yourself. I really think this game is good. I hope I was able to express what I loved so much about it. Thanks for watching. Eat the burger if you want to. You deserve it.